I was born in 1928. I was born on a farm. My father was a sharecropper in the old language, and then eventually, you know, farmed his own farm by renting farms later. By the time I was 10, I lived at Sickles, Oklahoma on a farm, and that's always been home to me.
That's where you grew up.
That's where I grew up. And although I won't discount the years before that I lived on a little Cobb Creek farm, which were wonderful years too.
Yeah.
But I grew up at Sickles, and my father was a cotton farmer. And so schools in those days had a spring vacation, early vacation, that the kids could go home and chop cotton, go down the fields and get out all the weeds. So we had that short vacation in the spring, 2 weeks I think. And in the fall we had a cotton picking vacation.
Yeah,
School would probably start in August, but schoolrooms were so hot and no air conditioning, etc. So everyone was glad to let the kids go home for a cotton picking vacation. If I remember right, it lasted probably the last week in September and a couple of weeks in October, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we were true farm children. We picked cotton, pulled bowls or picked cotton.
Wow.
And school started again after that by mid-October. Well, I had seen a picture in the catalog. It's either Sears and Roebuck or Montgomery Ward. That was our Macy's.
Yes.
And there was a picture of this blue wool dress suit, that I wanted so bad. It was in French blue. And so my father said, well, yes, if you go pick cotton for these neighbors and earn the money for it, yes. He just simply didn't have much more than to buy us our shoes and our school clothes. We didn't need a dress suit, but I thought I did. So I stayed out of school 2 weeks and picked cotton and earned the money, and I have a picture of me in that. I wish it was in color.
And ordered it, had it delivered.
Again, I love going to the mailbox. Going to my mailbox is the highlight of my day, every day still. You just don't know what you're going to find in it.
Like an
a diamond engagement ring, a blue wool suit, goodness knows what else. So the suit came and actually would have been probably what I would have worn to some of my end of school activities of my senior year, except I got married before that happened.
Yes.
When I met your father. I was 16 years old. I had already been dating. We double dated in those days. You know, we lived in the country. World War II was still going on then, and the older girls, the girls that were already in the 12th grade, most of them were engaged and wore pretty diamond rings. Their boyfriends were off in the service somewhere, or maybe actually already overseas. My brother was 17 when he joined the Navy, barely, the day before I think. He was 17. So all the young girls were getting engaged at least. It was so romantic, and here I was 16, and I thought, oh, wonderful. So school was out for summer vacation, and the boy that I had been dating, going with, and my best girlfriend dated his cousin, because we weren't allowed to go out alone, as in just two people, but we double dated. So the cousin that I was double dating went away on wheat harvest for the summer. Well, here I am all alone, but I'm going to be very good and not see anybody else till he comes back. But his cousin, who's dating my best friend, said, you think Jean would go with us to a movie Saturday night? Because my best friend from New Mexico is here. He's from Clovis, and he's a fireman with Santa Fe, and he's exempt from the service because of the Santa Fe needs him. But he's here for a few days, and I want Jean to come go with us so he'll have somebody to talk to during the evening too. So Jean said yes. I said, yay, of course. And so here they come. So before I met your father, Calvin brought him into the living room, introduced him to my parents. I'm in a room that's off of the living room. My bedroom's off of the living room. And my door's open so that I can hear, or slightly ajar. And so before I ever saw your father, I heard him play the guitar. And that still brings tears to my eyes after all these years to say that. He loved the guitar so much that he brought it in with him to meet this strange girl and these strange people, because it was his best friend and he was so at home with it. So he was playing the guitar and probably singing a song. He sang all of the old Irish folk songs.
Well.
Came from an Irish family, the Fletchers and the Witts. And,
yeah.
And so anyway, that's how I met your father.
Well.
World War II was still going on then. And one of the things I remember in particular, as we dated 2 or 3 times that week while he was there before he went back, he wore a leather jacket, and it smelled like smoke. He smoked cigarettes. Everyone smoked cigarettes then. And I thought, oh my gosh, it smells so good. And I'm all grown up, and here's the Marlboro Man. So, needless to say, the next time Santa Fe would let him loose for another trip to his hometown, he was from Cogar, Oklahoma. And so he was up again, I don't know, in 3 or 4 months. And that time he asked me to marry him.
Wow.
And I said yes, and I thought, oh goody, I'm going to get a diamond ring, yay! And so I said yes. And then he said, well, I want to ask your father's hand when I take you home tonight. We'll go in and I'll tell them I want to marry you. And I said, no, I have to break the news to them first. You know, I'm still 16. And I have to break the news to them because I knew that they would say,
no.
Go to your room and be quiet, Jean, silly thing. You're a baby. I knew that's what they would say. And I didn't want to be embarrassed in front of Tris or have his feelings hurt and him be embarrassed. So I told him when I got home. We were standing in the living room. I'm closer to my mother than my father saying there. And I said, Tris and I want to get married. And about that time, Mother threw her arms around me and said, oh, darling, how wonderful. I've waited for this day since the day you were born. So, and I'm going, oh.
And don't let the door hit you.
Yes. And I was
surprised you.
Oh, I'm going to get married. I went with my new husband to Clovis, New Mexico, and went to school there. And we were married in August, and so I went to the fall term, enrolled in school almost as soon as I got there. And then by the first of the year, really not the first of the year, I think it was February, before I knew I was pregnant. Here I am pregnant, scared to death, a new husband, away from my family, because in those days
they would.
You were very fortunate if they let you stay in school if you were married. But because of the war and so many people getting married young, they did let you go ahead and stay in school. That was a change.
That was changed there.
Yeah, that was a change. But they didn't let you go if you were pregnant, because that was a bad influence on the other girls.
I see.
Yeah, that was the reason. So I went to my good friend who was a business teacher, and I said, I'm pregnant. They're not going to let me go to school. What am I going to do? And this is April. And she said, when's your baby due? November. Well, you're not showing. You won't show. Nobody will know. Do not tell them.
And wear a big dress.
Do not tell them. And she meant the principal, superintendent, who would tell the school board, who would say, bye now. I was still very young, and I think somewhat frightened. I was still very much in awe of authority. I put that behind me somewhere over the years. I've lost that.
Yeah.
But at that time, authority was the big thing up there. And so I thought, I can't tell them, they will, and I can't go knowing that I should tell them. And so I just stopped going to school one day in April. I would have graduated in May, but I stopped in April, early April. And so I didn't get a high school certificate there. A tragedy happened. My husband was killed in a train wreck in Vaughn, New Mexico, where we had been transferred to East Vaughn, New Mexico. And Scott was a year and a half old, and my husband was, a train came, a brakeman had forgotten to throw the switch, I guess. The switchman had forgotten to throw the switch, is the way it was.
Yes.
And so a train just came barreling through, one of those that wouldn't stop at the roundhouse where Tris had a switch, was operating a switch train. I believe they were called. Anyway, it just hit them head on, and he was killed. My parents came to New Mexico and brought me back to a farm in Anadarko where they were farming then. And I was, as you say, 18, and my mother was helping with the child, and I'm at the farm home. My parents had this lovely home outside of Anadarko. It was a two-story a farmhouse, and I remember it well because Scott then, who was a year and a half, was in the upstairs bedroom and crawled out, and I was downstairs talking with my mom, not realizing this son was going to crawl out a window and onto a little roof there. And so I went up to see about him, and he's on, hi mama, out on the roof. I had a heart attack. So anyway, I don't know, life does go on, and while we were living there one day, this very, very nice looking man came to the house to talk with my father. And actually this was a Sunday afternoon, and we were all in the kitchen at a big dining table, and we were playing Monopoly. And so this nice visitor, who was, I believe he was the county treasurer at that time, and he said, I wanted to ask Walter, that's my father, about buying a certain farm that my dad had over here, 80 acres or something. I wanted to see about buying that from him. And Dad said, well, and I don't know what he said about that, but he said, sit down and play Monopoly with us. And so he did, and stayed there for a couple of hours or 3 hours all Sunday afternoon.
Well.
And when he left, I thought, the war's over by then, of course. He is a very handsome man. He's quite a bit older than I am, but I think security was one of my goals then, not consciously, no, unconsciously, yes. Anyway, when he left, I said to myself, I'm going to marry that man. Well, I think he may have said the same thing to himself when he left, because he was back a couple of weeks later to talk with my father again. And so that afternoon it wasn't Monopoly, but it was what people did and still do. We had rifle practice. We had a target set up, and we did some rifle. And my aim was very good. I was not an artist then, had loved art always. Had always thought I had an eye for art, but I assumed not much talent, not much, I didn't think. I hadn't had time to think about that, but I knew I had a good eye. And so I took the .22 rifle with utter confidence, and I mean, boy, I bullseyed every time. There's no problem for me. And Bob said, this was my handsome young man, Bob said, I knew right then I wanted to marry you.
Because you were such a good shot.
Remarried, had other children, eventually went back to school to get a diploma so I could earn my living after I got a divorce in I've forgotten when I got a divorce. That's 1969, I think. And I knew I needed to earn a living. And so I went back to college. A very dear friend told me, I said, I can't go to college. She says, come go to
OCLA?
Yeah,
Chickasha at the time.
USA, at Chickasha. Come go. Actually, this happened 9 years before, or 10 years before I got a divorce, actually, because this friend said, come go to college with me at Chickasha, OCW. Then it was still a college for women, OCW. And I said, I can't. I don't have my high school certificate. I quit high school 1 month before I graduated. I don't have. She said, it won't matter. You're an adult, and if you keep your grades up, the first year they have to let you come back. And so I went to OCW and talked to the head of the school, and they said to the admissions, yes, we have to, but you have to keep at least a B average. So, yay. And my youngest son, by then I had 3 children, and my youngest son started to school that year, so I didn't have to be home during the day. And so I started to school. I had this very exciting, I was in a carpool, and I drove back and forth to Chickasha, 20 miles from Anadarko, and it most wonderful years of my life. Well, no, but one of the most wonderful years of my life.
Yeah.
They were all wonderful years, and they still are.
And you did that for several years.
I did it for, well, I actually only got to go 1 year then, because I didn't go to summer school because the children were home and I needed to be home. So I didn't go to summer school. And by the end of that summer, or middle of that summer, I realized I was pregnant with my youngest child, Elizabeth. So these pregnancies kept interrupting my scholastic life and scholastic adventures. And at the dryer, it's just like it happened this morning. I was on my knees by the dryer taking sheets out of the bed for Elizabeth's bed, a used bed. I was taking the sheets out of the dryer, and Bob came back and he said, they shot Kennedy. And anger just leaped over me because I thought he was making a joke. I said, that is a horrible thing to joke about. Do not joke about that. That's a terrible thing to say. And I went back to pulling out sheets. And he said, it's not a joke. They had shot Kennedy. I stood up, left the sheets on that floor, went in and just threw myself face down on the bed and bawled. I could not move. I don't even know when I got up from there. I could not believe it. So for me, I guess because I was a little bit more mature and because I finally had time to concentrate on things other than just myself and what I had done so much, as you say, in a very short, young life. And I think, but by this time I had 4 children. And the youngest was Elizabeth, who was 9 then, about 9, 8. And I'd had time, my husband was a politician. By that time he was a state representative from Caddo County in Oklahoma. So I knew something about politics and enough to care.
Right.
And it broke my heart. The 60s, the very end of the 60s in 69 brought a divorce to me. Divorce was not very popular in those days. Now people don't get divorced because they don't get married in the first place. But it was very, but I loved the 60s. I was fortunate enough to take what was best from the 60s. And I was fortunate enough that the worst did not bother me. I was very, very fortunate. And what I got from the 60s was a nation that wanted to be kind. I think our whole nation wanted to be kind. I think we all did have our Camelot, but that's what it was for many, many of us.
Yeah.
And I think I want to know who I am. There were all those songs, I Gotta Be Me. Well, that went right through me. It was, and I don't know that it was that song, but it was that attitude. Who are you? Who am I? That was that's what I took from the 60s.
Yeah.
Who am I? What's this all about? And I thought, well, I know the one me, that's me. I want to go back to school. And my husband didn't want me to go back to school. Now, he was a wonderful and good man. Let there be no mistake about that. Let there be no mistake about this, that I very much wanted to go see what I could do by myself. Somewhere in the back of my mind, maybe from my cotton picking days, somewhere back in my mind I wanted to know, if I could take care of me, I've got to be me. And so actually when I did go back to college at Chickasha and finally got a degree, a BFA from Chickasha without a high school diploma, because I had made their Dean's Honor Roll that first year, which I don't mind bragging about that, because I had been out of school and never actually graduated, and I had been out for 20 years, I don't know, 15 years, whatever I had been out of school.
Yeah.
I had made the honor roll because I worked. I was used to work. I was raised with a good work ethic, and I think that stood by me. Anyway, when I graduated from by then it was OCLA, I believe. I went through 4 different names at that college.
Yeah.
Now they are USAO, and they are still the best school in Oklahoma and in the United States, perhaps.
Sure.
By the time I went, to get my BFA, it was a liberal arts college, and that so went with the 60s. And I remember some of the students there were true hippies with hair as long as mine is, I mean the guys, and their fingernails 2 inches long because they wanted everybody to know they didn't work for a living. Well, I was lucky. I didn't take that ethic from them. I didn't. But I did take the ethic that flowers are more beautiful than war, and peace is better than just about anything, and to be what you are is the most important thing of all. I had always loved art, and when I was in high school, my mother had saved 2 or 3 little drawings that I had done then. I think I still have them somewhere. I had just copied them out of a history book, I suppose, or social studies. Even then, I was a good Democrat at heart, very, very young age. Well, of course, Franklin D. Roosevelt was everyone's hero then, and so I had done some ink drawings of him from my history books, and 1 or 2 other drawings. I'm sure I did many others, but those were the 2 that my mother had saved, and I saw them years and years later. My friend Eugene that I had mentioned earlier was an artist, a high school artist. He did beautiful, beautiful drawings, and I loved them, and oh, I wished I just ached. I wanted to draw, but I knew I couldn't. And so, you know, I didn't, and I was a very, very busy person. I didn't have time to really think. Well, I was living in New Mexico there with my brand new husband and brand new baby. I do remember getting some watercolors and some paper, not watercolor paper, I'm sure, just somehow, probably newsprint, and doing my version of a New Mexico dust storm. We had terrific sandstorms, dust storms on this mountaintop in the central New Mexico where we lived. And
you say terrific or horrific?
Both. Well, you know, I was used to sandstorms at Sickles, Oklahoma, but I was not used to sandstorms or dust storms that blew grit into your face. They were amazing, but they were amazingly beautiful also. And I remember doing a watercolor, my first attempt at a watercolor of the blue skies and the sand coming. And I remember how it looked, but of course I just tore it up and put it in the waste paper basket when I finished. I did some of those. So I had this yearning, but that's all it was. It was an unvoiced yearning.
Yeah.
My older daughter, Roberta, who was Roberta during her growing up years, and now she's Casey, so I'll call her Casey. But she was an artist. As soon as she could hold a pencil, she was drawing. She was doing cartoons, strips of cartoons, before she started to school. She was just amazing. She was drawing. And then on through grade school, high school. When she was in high school, her art teacher showed some of her work at a show that the high school had at Southwestern University. So she had, in fact, she sold, a man came to see us from Weatherford, Oklahoma, to pick up a watercolor that he had seen in the art show when they had the art display there, and he had told the teacher he wanted to buy it. That's how good she was at the beginning. And so he came to Anadarko, bought the watercolor. I think it was a portrait of a child, but it was beautiful. Wow. So he brought that, and so anyway, so I'm telling you this to tell you that how wonderful her art talent came out to the forefront from before she started, when she was in kindergarten. And so one day when she was in high school, and we were sitting in the bedroom in Anadarko, and in those days, you fixed your hair all the time. You put it up in curlers. All the women, all of you remember, you usually went to bed with bobby pins in your hair, or curlers are horrible. So she's there putting curlers in my hair in front of the mirror, and I'm looking in the mirror while she's doing this, and we're talking about her artwork, and I said, oh, I wish I could have been an artist. Oh, I wish I could have done that. And I just had this deep yearning. She said, you can, Mother. Of course you can. I didn't know you wanted. Of course you can. I said, no, I can't. I don't have any talent. You don't. Mother, wait. So she left. She went out and got paper, one of her art tablets, drawing paper and pencils, and came in and put it in front of me. Said, now, look in the mirror. You take this pencil, look in the mirror. Look at the shape of your face, the outline of it. Do that, Mother. So I did that. Okay, Mother, do the hair, do the outline. And she walked me through the eyes, everything. Do this, Mother. You can be, oh my gosh, I can do this. That was the moment. That was the moment.
Oh, I've never heard that story.
No. Well, it's
a good
maybe
one.
Not a very interesting story, but that is the way that happened. And so then I started all right. I had a job, the first job in my life. Elizabeth was 4, about this same time, and I worked in the Methodist church as a church secretary. And the minister was a young And this is another wonderful, wonderful thing that came out of the 60s. This is still in the 60s. This is about 64. And this wonderful Methodist minister, Glenn Miller, said, we need to start, first he said, we need to start a daycare for children in our church. Churches didn't have daycare for children then. It just wasn't done. This was out of the 60s. This was some of the freedom that came with it. Mm-hmm. And churches were allowed to have daycares for, heaven help us, children who weren't Methodists even. Mm-hmm. And so I could take Elizabeth. The Methodist church was just across the street from our home in Anadarko. So I could take her catty corner across the street, put her down in the daycare, go upstairs to my office, and it was there. I had written all my life. Here in Sulphur, I belonged to a writers group, and it was a wonderful, wonderful privilege and a wonderful part of my life. But I still have a writing or two that I wrote about working in the church office there, and I treasure those poems or whatever they are. And so we got the daycare started. Then one day, this Glenn Miller said, Jean, we ought to start a painting class, an art class for senior citizens, or for whoever wants to take it, for a leisure time activity. We need to start. Well, who in the world would have an art class in a church basement? It was not done in those days. This was another wonderful freedom that came in the 60s, that a young, energetic Methodist minister could have these futuristic ideas. A painting class? Mm-hmm. But we did. We organized it. We sent out invitations through our church and to the community. And so many people like me were hungry for that. And our first teacher was the high school art teacher, Gary Hanks.
Right.
And he was actually Casey's art teacher at that time.
Mm-hmm. I remember that.
Yes. And so we started, and that's where I picked up my first paintbrush. So that's how my love of art started. I would like to tell you a bit later why I came to the School for the Deaf, but I will say I came suddenly and unexpectedly as a teacher to the School for the Deaf in Sulphur. So I'm in a new situation. I don't know the language. I don't know how to, I've never really taught before other than substitute teaching, so that's a new area. I think it helped me cope with the newness, the unfamiliarity, and how to deal with it. And one thing I will say here's another way it helped me cope. I was in Mexico. I went back to Mexico to visit after I started teaching at the School for the Deaf. I went back to Mexico several trips. And when I got there and my Spanish would fail me, I would start speaking with sign language to the poor Mexican who's standing there, the shopkeeper, the guy on the street, whatever. My Spanish fails me, and I'm signing like mad. And then, wait, I can't do that. So then I come back and I'm teaching the kids or talking to the faculty at OSD. Well, the sign language fails me, and I begin talking in Spanish to them. Stop my sign language. Well, and speak in Spanish. So anyway, it worked both ways, but it helped me, I think, with it being unfamiliar and able to laugh at it and cope and go on. Art is a universal language, and the fact that I did not have sign language when I started at OSD the fact that I could pick up a pencil and paper and draw helped me so tremendously. It is a universal language. My first experiences with the art classes at OSD, I would notice that the kids, and I had some elementary age kids at that time and later too, as well as high school kids, but I especially noticed it with the elementary kids. I would give them crayons, the older kids the watercolors, the paints, to do something, do whatever on their page, and they would reach for the brown crayons, the brown paint, the black, the gray, everything, you know, like that, over and over. And I was distressed, and I thought to myself, and what I still believe was the reason, they were as unsure as I was, especially the younger children. They were as unsure. Black, brown, dark, subdued colors are safer. They are safer. You get bright orange, green, wait, what's going on here? And so what I did was get finger paints and big sheets of paper and did it myself, put the finger paints all over the paper, and then I did this. All right, I want you to finger paint, and I want you to do this. And after a few classes of that where I would use it and do it myself and demonstrate, I never worked on their papers, I never did, but they began doing that. Well, she's so free, she can do this, we can too. And it worked. And before long, they were using wonderful colors and motions and freedom in their work.